My grandma asked, "Do you like the house I bought you?" I said, "What house?" Then he looked my. You ever have that moment when your entire life feels like a lie? Yeah, that was me, the day my grandma asked me a question that changed everything. "Barbara," she said, her wrinkled hands clasped together, "do you like the house I bought you?" I blinked. My coffee cup froze midair. "Wait. What house?" She smiled faintly, a strange twinkle in her eyes. "The one you've been living in, dear." But here's the thing. I didn't own a house. I rented my tiny apartment downtown, and the only property I ever dreamed of owning was still pinned on my Pinterest board. I laughed nervously. "Grandma, you must be confusing me with someone else." She didn't laugh back. And that's where everything started to unravel. I grew up thinking my grandma, Margaret, was the sweetest woman alive, lace dresses, cookies every Sunday, and that smell of lavender that followed her everywhere. But after my mom passed away when I was 19, Grandma changed. She became quieter. Sharper. She started writing things down, names, numbers, dates, like a detective in her own family. When I turned 33, she called me to her estate. "We need to talk about something important, Barbara," she said. Her lawyer was there too, a tall man with glasses who looked like he hadn't smiled since the early 2000s. "Barbara," Grandma said, "I want you to understand that everything I own will go to family. But not everyone will get what they expect." I remember thinking that was strange because Grandma had 3 children, my dad, Uncle Peter, and Aunt Carol, and I was just the quiet granddaughter who visited once in a while. She continued, "Some people need to be taught a lesson about greed." I didn't know it then, but she meant my father. 2 weeks later, I got a call at 2 a.m. "Barbara," my father's voice crackled through the line, "your grandmother's had a stroke." I dropped everything and drove 3 hours to the hospital. She was alive, but barely. Tubes, machines, that awful beeping sound that never stops. I held her hand and whispered, "Please don't go. I still need you." Her eyes fluttered open for just a second. She whispered something, barely audible. I leaned closer. "The house. Under your name. They can't touch it." Then she closed her eyes. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. After she passed, everything turned ugly. My father and his siblings tore through her mansion like vultures. "Where's the will? Who gets the land? What about the jewelry? And me?" I just stood there, numb. Until the lawyer arrived with a sealed envelope. He said, "This one's for Barbara. From your grandmother, personally." Inside was a handwritten letter and a single key. "My dearest Barbara. You've always been the only one who never asked me for anything. That's why this house is yours. You'll find the deed at the bottom of the garden under the old oak tree. Love, Grandma." I thought it was poetic nonsense. Until I remembered the oak tree behind her old property. I drove straight there that night, alone, flashlight in hand, rain pouring down like a movie scene. The garden was overgrown, but the oak tree still stood strong. I dug beneath the roots until my hands hit something hard, a metal box. Inside was a folder marked, "Property Deed, 145 Orchard Lane." That address sounded familiar. I typed it into Google Maps. My heart stopped. It was the house I lived in. The same one I paid rent for every month. The house my landlord, Mr. Harrison, claimed he owned. I went straight to my landlord the next morning. "Mr. Harrison, can we talk?" I asked, holding the deed. He laughed nervously. "Sure, Barbara. What's this about?" I slammed the papers on his desk. "Why are you collecting rent on a house that's legally mine?" His face turned pale. He stammered, "What do you mean? There must be a mistake." No mistake, I said coldly. It's signed by Margaret L. Reeves. That's my grandmother. He swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the corner where a photo hung, him, smiling beside my father. My blood ran cold. You've been working with my dad? I asked. He didn't answer. That's when it all made sense. My father, always broke, always borrowing money, had convinced Grandma to let him manage her rental properties. And when she died, he continued to collect rent from tenants, even from me. I went to the county records office. Sure enough, the house was indeed registered in my name, but the mailing address for tax documents had been changed to my father's business. Had been intercepting everything. Taxes, bills, correspondence. He even forged my signature to authorize himself as my property manager. I was shaking with rage. But instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to wait. I wanted him to dig his own grave. I invited everyone to dinner, my dad, Uncle Peter, Aunt Carol. I cooked Grandma's favorite stew and even lit her old candles. I wanted the night to feel normal. Right before I dropped the bomb. As we sat around the table, my father smirked. So, Barbara, what are you up to these days? Still paying that overpriced rent? I smiled sweetly. Actually, no. I own the place now. He laughed. What? Since when? Since Grandma's will, I said, sliding the deed across the table. The color drained from his face. Uncle Peter and Aunt Carol leaned in, gasping. I continued, funny thing, though, the landlord I've been paying rent to seems to be your old friend Harrison. I found tax documents with your address on them. Silence. Only the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, he said, Barbara, you don't understand. I was just keeping things organized for you. By forging my signature? I said. By stealing thousands in rent? He opened his mouth, but I wasn't done. I already reported everything to Grandma's lawyer. And to the police. His fork clattered onto the plate. It turned out Grandma had been one step ahead the entire time. She had recorded every conversation with my father in her final months, where he begged her to transfer properties under his name, promising to take care of Barbara. Those recordings were gold. The police called it fraud, identity theft, and document falsification. My father was arrested within a week. Uncle Peter tried to reason with me, saying, family shouldn't destroy family over money. I looked him dead in the eye and said, family shouldn't steal from family either. After the trial, I went back to Grandma's estate to pack her belongings. In her closet, I found another box, this one labeled, for Barbara, when the truth is out. Inside were letters, old ones, between Grandma and my mother before she died. They talked about how my father had always been reckless with money, how Grandma feared he'd manipulate me someday. And then there was one last envelope. It said, Barbara, if you're reading this, it means you've already learned the truth. But I need you to do one more thing. Look under the floorboard of the house I gave you. I ran home and lifted the floorboard in my bedroom. Inside was a small velvet box. A locket. Inside the locket was a photo of me as a baby. And a key. The key opened the safe in her lawyer's office. And what was inside that safe? Her entire remaining estate, bank accounts, jewelry, stocks, transferred to my name. My father had stolen thousands. But Grandma had left me millions. I could have let my father rot in jail. But I wanted to make sure he felt what he did to me. So I did something he didn't expect. I bailed him out. When he asked, why? I said, because I want you to see how it feels to lose everything in front of your eyes. Then I handed him an eviction notice, for his house. Turns out, Grandma had also owned that property. And it transferred to me as part of her trust. He stared at me in disbelief. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I would, I said quietly. You taught me that blood doesn't mean loyalty. He tried to fight it legally, but every document, every signature he'd forged, came back to haunt him. He lost everything, his house, his business, his reputation. And I finally had peace. A few months later, Grandma's lawyer called me again. There's one more thing, he said. She left a video for you. I watched it alone in my living room, tears streaming down my face. Grandma sat in her favorite chair, looking straight at the camera. Barbara, my darling, if you're seeing this, you've finally seen people for who they are. I know it hurt. But you're stronger than you think. I didn't just give you a house, I gave you your freedom. Use it wisely. Then she smiled. And Barbara, never let anyone tell you that kindness is weakness. Sometimes, it's the sharpest weapon. I renovated Grandma's old house, planted roses around that oak tree, and started a foundation in her name, for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. The first donation came anonymously. But I knew it was from Uncle Peter. A small olive branch. As for my father, last I heard, he moved to another state, working as a clerk in a hardware store. We haven't spoken since. And that's okay. Because revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone, it means taking back what was stolen and walking away stronger. People sometimes ask me why I didn't realize the house was mine sooner. The truth? Grandma didn't just buy me a house. She built me a test. A way to see if I'd choose integrity over greed. And I did. That day, when she asked, "Do you like the house I bought you?" She wasn't talking about bricks and walls. She was talking about the life she'd built for me behind the lies and betrayal. I finally looked back at her portrait hanging in the hall and whispered, "Yes, Grandma. I love the house." Revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free.